Starting off this countdown, we have the pain. Okay, this one is hella freaky, but a number of people have claimed that they felt a weird sensation either just before or after someone close to them has passed. Let's take psychiatrist Bernard Bateman's story for example. Apparently one day he experienced this weird strong feeling in his throat. It felt like he was choking. But later that day he learned that his father had choked to death on his own blood. The time that his dad died was the same time he felt this choking sensation himself. Isn't that crazy? It's freaky. In our 9th spot, we have the dreams. Has anyone here ever experienced night terrors before? If you have, you know how freaking scary they are and how real they feel. Well, it's said that spirits will try to communicate with you through your dreams. Malicious spirits or demonic entities, they will torment you through your dreams. Either you will have a horrifying reoccurring dream, or there will be reoccurring themes like death, murder, you name it. Or the demons will play into your biggest fears. Let's say you're deathly afraid of spiders and snakes. They'll manipulate your dreams so that's what you're dreaming about. Or even worse, the demon itself will appear to you in your dream being like, I'm coming for you. This has happened in real life to a number of people. Sadly, most of these victims develop insomnia because they're too afraid to sleep. Others have taken their lives because they just can't take it anymore. Moving on to number 8, we have the messages. Imagine receiving a text message, email, or phone call from a deceased friend or relative. Well, a number of people have claimed that this has happened to them. The first story involves a woman named Mary, whose mother died of cancer a couple of years ago. Months later, on Mary's birthday, she received a message on her phone from her mom. When she opened it up, it was a voice note. The voice note was a recording of her mom singing happy birthday. But here's the thing, her mom's phone was deactivated, so how on earth was this message sent? Also, her mom was dead, so how did she send a voice message? Another freaky story comes from a man named Tim. Tim claims that his deceased wife was communicating to him through phone calls. Almost every night, Tim would get a call around 9:05. The time that his wife passed away. When he answers the phone, all he hears is silence, but he knows that this is from his wife. The phone call lasts a minute until the clock changes to 9:06. I mean, in a way it's sweet, but also it's just really creepy. Coming in at number 7, we have the wild animals. Getting a surprise visit from some furry animals can be quite cool, as long as it's like friendly animals like bunnies or rabbits, even deer. Maybe though, every time you talk about your deceased loved one, you notice a bunny hopping in your yard. This could be a sign that your loved one is near, or maybe their spirit is now in that bunny. It's a bad sign, however, if dead animals appear around your house, like dead crows, bunnies, or cats on your doorstep, etc. That's a bad sign. Even dead parts of an animal. In some cases it could be stray cats or foxes leaving these. Or it could be an evil spirit. Or it's an omen, someone sending you a sign that something bad is going to happen to you. In our 6th spot, we have the odd coincidences. Have you ever been going on about your day when you notice some weird patterns or coincidences happening to you? For example, maybe you've been thinking of your deceased grandmother when all of a sudden you get a whiff of her favorite perfume. Then later that day you decide to go buy that perfume and the clerk cashing you out has the same name as your grandmother. That's a sign that she's there with you. But not all coincidences are as pleasant as this one. One guy shared his freaky story with this. So he claims that when he was younger, he almost died after falling into the subway train tracks, but a man in a trench coat ended up saving his life. His name was Edward S. Years later, the boy, now a man, moves into a new house. While exploring the attic, he discovers that it was previously owned by Edward S. But sadly, he passed away after falling down a flight of stairs in the basement. As soon as he learned that his savior lived in the house that he just bought, he started having dreams and visions about him. One of the visions involved seeing Edward getting pushed down the stairs by his neighbor. Immediately, the man was like, okay, I think Edward was murdered by his neighbor. And guess what? In the end, he was right. Edward was sending him signals from the afterlife. It's just crazy how they kind of both saved each other in a way. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the flickering lights. Next time you're walking home in the middle of the night and the street lights above you start to flicker, maybe take that as a sign to run the hell home. Because because spirits have the power to manipulate electricity. They can send signals by flicking lights on and off. So maybe a flickering street light is a sign that you're not alone on that dark, sketchy street. In fact, one woman claimed that she had a conversation with a spirit that was haunting her house through the flickering of a light bulb. She told the spirit to flicker the light once for yes and twice for no, and through that, she was able to talk to the spirit. Moving on to number 4, we have the feathers. Now, I learned this years ago from my friend's mom, and it's always stuck with me ever since. Apparently, feathers are a sign that a spirit is there with you. So if you find a white feather in a spot where it makes no sense to be, then it's a sign that someone is there watching over you. But let's say you find one on the floor next to your down feathered jacket. Well, obviously the feather fell out of your jacket, so that doesn't count. That's why it said it has to be in a place where it doesn't make sense to be. Here's the thing though, if you see a black feather, then that's bad. That means that a demon or evil entity is around you. In particular, you should be scared if you find a black feather sticking directly up from the ground by your house. In this case, do not touch the feather and go get yourself cleansed. Coming in at number 3, we have the manipulation of electronics. Like I said before, spirits have the power to manipulate electricity. They also have the power to manipulate certain electrical devices like TVs and radios, and sometimes even battery-powered toys. There are 2 main stories that I want to talk about today. One involves a cursed Elmo doll. One year, a family got an Elmo doll for Christmas, and a spirit clearly took a liking for that red-hugging doll because during the middle of the night, it would speak as if someone pressed it. The doll would all be like, ha ha ha, that tickles, you know? The family decided to take out the batteries, and guess what? The doll would still chuckle and laugh. Dude, I tossed that Elmo out the window so fast. Another family had a similar experience, but this time with a battery-powered train. On a number of occasions, they caught the train moving around their house on its own. Clearly, the ghost was a fan of Thomas and Friends. In our second spot, we have the Stank Smells. If you've seen the Conjuring movies, then chances are you already know about this point. But it's said that evil spirits or demons can be identified with bad smells like sulfur or rotten eggs. If the smell comes out of nowhere then leaves out of nowhere, either someone tooted or a demon was just in your presence. Let's take a look at the Perron family, the family that the first Conjuring movie was based off of. According to the family, their house would smell like rotting flesh. First of all, how did they even know what rotting flesh smelled like in the first place? Anyway, when Lorraine Warren got a whiff of it, she knew that they were being haunted. And when the smell was coming from Carolyn Perron herself, Lorraine knew she was possessed by a demon. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Paranormal Activity. A clear sign that someone is with you from the afterlife is if spooky stuff happens around you, like objects moving on its own, you feel someone's presence by you, you hear voices, doors slam on their own, etc. Now, if this happens frequently and at a certain time, then the spirit might be trying to tell you something. For example, let's go back to the Perron family haunting case again. Every morning at 5:15 they would wake up to their bed shaking. Every morning, always at that time. Another example would be the story of Grace. A woman named Grace moved into a home. Every night at 12:43 she would hear loud banging noises and sometimes screaming. Well, back in the day, the owner of the house was killed in her sleep at 12:43 at night. Starting off this countdown, we have the static. There's a lot of stories out there about dead people calling their loved ones. It's freaky how many people have experienced this, just like this next person. So their aunt passed away from a number of health complications. A couple days later at around 7 a.m., her grandma, which was her aunt's mother, got a phone call. The caller ID said that it was their aunt calling. What was weird is that she normally called around 7 a.m. every day, but now since she was dead, they were pretty confused. But they answered the phone and all they heard was static. They believed that it was the aunt trying to get in contact with her mom again. Moving on at number 9, we have Pennies from Heaven. Have you ever heard of the term pennies from heaven? And I'm not talking about the song and movie. Well, some use this phrase to refer to ghosts using coins to communicate with you. Maybe you wake up and find a penny on the ground by your desk and you're like, that's weird, how did that get there? Well, it might have been placed there by a spirit trying to get in contact with you. But why pennies? Well, the copper in which pennies are made up of are considered a conductor for electromagnetic fields, which are said to be emitted by spirits. So it's easy for them to manipulate pennies. A number of people have reported finding random pennies around their house after the passing of a loved one. This could be a sign that they are still there with you and are reaching out. Too bad here in Canada, they discontinued Pennies, so whoops. In our 8th spot, we have the doctor. According to this woman named Lauren C., her grandmother was a pediatrician from Puerto Rico, so a lot of people just called her La Doctora. When she passed away a few years ago, she believed that her grandmother reached out and left a note for her and her mom. So they were staying at a hotel when they found a note left on their dresser. The note read, "Contactos con los muertos." I'm so sorry, I know I butchered this, but it means contact with the dead, and it was signed La Doctora. How wild is that? They believed that this was from their grandmother, letting them know that she's still around. In our 7th spot, we have the EVP. EVPs are devices that ghost hunters use to get in contact with spirits. It's like a voice box for the spirit so that they can manipulate this device and use it to form words. Well, a woman named Kimberly H. decided to use one a week after her uncle died. The first thing that the spirit said was John, which is her dad's name. Then it got weirder because the second thing it said was brother. So she believes that she was talking to her uncle who was trying to get in contact with his brother John, aka her dad. Unfortunately, Kimberly was too scared to continue on with the EVP device, so she never got to find out what his message to his brother was. In our 6th spot today, we have Sorry. This story was posted by Absolutely Insane Geek on Reddit. According to him, when his dad was about 15 years old, he decided to use an Ouija board with his friends. As they were calling on a spirit, they actually got in contact with one, and it used the board to spell out the dad's name. The next thing it spelled out was sorry. The spirit was apologizing to the dad because his favorite uncle had recently passed away. In fact, it might have been the uncle himself reaching out to him. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Help Me. This next story comes from Juby Love. So one day she was calling her mom when the call got picked up and all she heard was static. She said hello multiple times, but there was nothing. Then that's when she heard someone whisper on the other end of the line. She listened in carefully and she heard a woman whispering, help me, repeatedly. Now she freaked out thinking that her mom was in trouble. The call ended, but she kept calling back. A few calls later, her mom answered. She claims that she never got the call until now since she was out of service. So who was the woman on the other line that answered the phone and needed help? In our 4th spot today, we have the grandmother's warning. When Christian's family went out of town for spring break and left him alone, he thought, hey, what better time than to use an Ouija board? So he was in his kitchen using the board by himself when all of a sudden the kitchen sink turned on. When he asked who it was that did that, the board spelt out Renee, which was his great-grandmother's name. Then for some reason, the planchette kept moving to the numbers 3 and 4. Well, his great-grandmother was 34 when she passed away. When he told his mom what happened, she freaked out. Apparently, Renee hated Ouija boards and she was very, very against them. So she thinks that Renee was using the board to warn her family to stop using it. Even with her being dead, she still found a way to scold her family. In our 3rd spot today, we have the Party Phantom. So this next individual, Jess Gals, shared a story on behalf of her friend. Her friend had just moved into a new house and decided to throw a party. While at the party, she had a little too much to drink and ended up leaving some drunken voicemails for her friends. The next day, they all were having a hoot listening to her drunk messages, until they heard something very scary at the back of one. In one of the voicemails, they heard this very scary, aggressive voice yell, Vivian. A couple of days later, they were talking to their neighbors and found out that the previous tenant of their house was a lady named Vivian. She had died in that house. See, that's why you do your research on the house before you buy it and move into it. You gotta make sure no people die in the house and that it's not haunted. In our 2nd spot, we have the poem. Now this story is absolutely wild. It was shared by Reddit user Kazurli on behalf of her mom. According to the Reddit user, her mom was very close to her grandmother. Just before she passed away, her gran bought her a book full of poems. When she did pass, she randomly found the book sitting open in plain sight. The book was open to a page called Do Not Weep at My Grave. From then on, her mom would read her that story every night for months on end until they both felt better about the grandma's passing. Fast forward to several years later, her mom found the poem book and decided to revisit that passage. However, it was no longer in the book. She flipped through it madly, but the poem called Do Not Weep at My Grave was not there. In fact, it wasn't even in the table of contents. It was never in the book at all. So they both think that this was a sign from her gran as a way to help them deal with their grief. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Pat. While in college, Mary Kay and her sorority sisters decided to play with an Ouija board one night. To make things spookier, they took a board to the oldest frat house on campus. At first, they were all fooling around with the board, and that was until it kept spelling out Pat, 18, Keg, and NU, which made no sense to any of them. They just thought that one of the sisters was fooling around and moving the planchette. That was until later on when they found out that the house that they were in once was named Sigma NU. But it was shut down in the 80s because an 18-year-old freshman named Pat died from alcohol poisoning during a kegger. Remember what the board spelt out? Pat, 18, Keg, NU. That story just gave me chills all over. Man,